welcome to Lothar's Guitar School. And today we're checking out this Reussenzehn El34 with different tubes and different settings. And let me show you first what it's about. The Reussenzehn El34 is a single-ended Class A amplifier. It's run with 2 preamp tubes and 1 power tube. It has a port for gain control, for tone control and for master, unusual for a small single-ended amp. Between triode and pentode the power can be minimized, triode has less. There's a bright switch to brighten up, and here is a clean, crunch and hot switch and the input. The clean, crunch and hot can also be operated with this foot switch, which is plugged into this socket here. You can attach a speaker, 8 to 16 ohms. In this version I have a small practice speaker that you can plug in easily, and it is good for just a little bedroom level practice. There's a line out and the level control for the line and a ground lift. That's the basics from the outside. There are 4 screws at the side so that you can take off the cage and switch the power tubes. There are different power tubes that you can use. There's a special one that Reussenzehn made a socket for, so you can put in an El84 instead of the standard El34. You also can put in a 6V6, you can put in a 6L6 like this one, and even bigger ones like the 6550, or even more the KT88. And now let's see what we can do and practice with this. The setup now that I made to check the spectrum is pretty simple. I hooked up a simple pink noise generator into the input, and the power soak by Reussenzehn is included here. So I go from the amp into the power soak and out, and the headphone output goes into my spectrum analyzer. And I have a setting so that each light is about 3 dBs. So when I start now with a clean position, it kind of looks like this. This is when all the tone control is all the way up, and when I turn up the bright, it gives me even more highs. So this is a pretty bright situation for a single-ended amp. On the other hand, if I turn this down, the tone control, we have a very low and low mids concentrated curve for a situation with the tone control out. If I now go to a situation where I go to a high gain, hot position, all the way up here, it kind of looks like this. Very similar situation in this curve. If I turn the tone control up, again we have starting at about here at about 400 Hertz, a pretty even curve. And interesting, when I turn the bright switch on here, it actually diminishes a little bit the input. And the same is true if I go to the triode position. Obviously we have a lot less power. So that's the situation with an El34 hooked up. In the clean setup with an El34 and Fender Strat, we need to turn the tone all the way up, and I like to switch the bright switch up. If it is off, it sounds like this. If you turn it up, what I expect. It's not a Fender-like sound, and it's slightly in the distortion side. It's not extremely clean, but you can make nice clean sounds with it. Now let's check it in a crunch position with my Heritage 535. So it reacts a lot on the volume part, because when you hit now a chord, that's too heavy, but when you turn it down, it's a nice crunch. And the position I chose for this one is the crunch switch, bright off, tone in the middle, mass in the middle, and gain in the middle. And now in the hot position with my Telecaster Custom II in the position of the humbuckers. So you see, this has a lot of power and a lot of crunch, to say distortion in this case. And the position I chose was the gain to about 12 o'clock, in the hot position the switch, tone a little bit up and the mass a little bit down. And when you turn the tone control, you'd notice that it doesn't do that much anymore as it does with the clean position, but it still changes the sound. And if you go to the gain control even higher, you have a lot of more power there. But it then also gets a little noisy. So this was the EL34. Now let's check it with another tube. If I have now an EL84 in the special socket replaced, the situation looks as follows. I go to a clean position at first again, master all the way up, gain to about 9 o'clock. And we see it's a very similar curve as before, maybe not as low mids present as before. We have a little bit more mids here. If I turn up the tone control all the way up, again, the situation looks very similar than before. And if I turn the bright switch on, again, we have more brights and actually the lows go down a little bit. If I go to the triode position, again it just lowers the output a little bit. If I go now to a position hot with a lot of gain, tone control all the way down, looks like this. Again, more mids than before. And fairly even when we turn the tone control up, and the similar situation before when we turn the bright switch on. Actually it lowers the lows a little bit. That's it for the EL84. By the way, be very careful when you change the power tube. Turn off the amp, and it's very hot, so you should wait a little bit. It's also better for the tube when you change it. Now that's it with the EL84. And in order to make it a little bit more comparable, I recorded the Strat into the looper, and just each time I'll loop the sound for you. The situation same, master up, tone up, gain about 9 o'clock, and bright up, and here we go. As you can hear, the tone control needs to be all the way up the same way and the bright switch on to get a nice clean sound. This has a lot of power, this little tube, so I actually turned the gain control a little bit further down than before. Sound otherwise with the chorus is very similar and gives a nice clean sound. So now let's check it with the next guitar, the next loop. So that's the crunch sound with the 535. And here it is in the crunch position with the EL84. Master 12 o'clock, tone 12 o'clock, gain 12 o'clock, bright off, and crunch position here. And now let's hear it. Okay, so now let's move to the distorted hot position. Master about 1030, tone control 130, gain control 12, bright off, and hot position here. Okay, that's that for the hot position. At the end I turned the gain up a little bit more to see what it does, and you hear we have more noise then at the same time. And now let's move to the next tube, to the Fender type tubes. We had an EL34, which is more a Marshall type tube. We had the EL84, which is used in the AC30. And now what about a Fender type tube, the 6V6, which is used in the Princetons, for instance. That's the small power tube of the Fenders. If I turn up the master and gain control as we had before, we see it doesn't have as much power. We have to put it a little bit more to get it to about the same levels. The curve is similar with more mids than before. Turning up the tone control gives us a fairly even spectrum starting at about 315 Hertz, and with the bright switch added, again we have more highs, but it also cuts down the lows a little bit more. If we turn the triode on, same again, less power, no surprise. Now let's go to a situation where we have more gain. Run it hot. We have to have even more power than before. This is tone control down. This is tone control up. And bright again diminishes actually the brightness a little bit in the hot position. And now to the small Fender type amps, 6V6 tube here, like in a Princeton, clean setup, and let's hear our lick again. You can hear it has a little less volume, but it's nice, bright sounding, and it's a little bit more highs, I think. And again, for clean sound, tone all the way up, bright switch up. There you go. Now let's see what this sounds like with a crunch sound. In the crunch position, the 6v6 needs a little bit more power, so I put the master into about 1 o'clock and the same settings otherwise. Here we go. And since I put this in with the volume control, this reacts the same way. Less volume, the sound is less distorted. Nice, bright crunch sound. And now let's go to the distorted sound. Hot distorted sound with 6v6. As you noticed, when I turn up the gain control more or lower it, it doesn't have that much of an effect. It stays still very hot, even with this little Fender type 6v6. Now let's move to another tube, the bigger Fender sound, the 6 L6s, which are in the Twins for instance. Now with the bigger Fender type 6 L6 we have the following situation. Now let's check clean first again. Not much of a difference than before. Tone control up. And we see it peaks a little bit down here in the very bottom. It's a bigger tube, so it will do that. Bright again, very bright sounding. Go into the hot position. You'll see that little bump around 80 Hertz, which is the very low end of the guitar. Tone control all the way up. Right on. Doesn't work here either. And triode. Diminish the power. I don't know if I mentioned that before. I run this through a cabinet, also from Reussenzehn, a 12-inch Eminence speaker with it, an open box. So now let's check with the bright position here. Same position again, master up, tone up, gain 9 o'clock, bright switch on. I have the feeling it does not have as much volume as the EL34, but it has a nice warmth, a little bit more than the 6v6 before. So now let's check it with the crunch sound. To my opinion, it doesn't have as much volume as the EL34 and the 84, but it has a surprisingly warm sound to it, though it comes from a Fender type tube. And now let's check the distorted hot sound. Now let's check it with the big 6 550. In the clean position we have the following situation. A lot of low mids, even more in the lows. If we turn the tone control all the way up and the bright switch on, we see that 80 Hertz bump even more predominant, though we have a lot of highs, but it gives us nice bottom end as well. If we go to the hot position, turn gain up, go to hot here, and see again a lot of low and low mids. Even starting around 800, 1K, and bright does the opposite. This is now the Softex 655 in the clean position. Did you notice that 80 cycle peak is pretty dominant on this tube? It gives you this low end of the guitar and a nice top as well. It breaks up a little bit more in the clean sound, I have the feeling. So let's check now how the crunch sounds. Nice warm sound, and I turned at the end the master a little bit up because to get rid of the distortion I turned the guitar down and then turned the master up to make it louder. So I think this is a great amp for recording. On the stage I don't know, because this is a one-channel amp. You can get a lot of sounds out of it, but you cannot change the sounds through foot switch. You can, but then the volume differs a lot. And this is the 655 in the hot position. Okay, I think that's where this tube really shines. Has a lot of volume, a lot of bottom, still enough mids and highs. That has a real deep sound. I like this position here with hot and the 655. Now let's check the last tube, the KT88. When you set the tube, make sure you set it correctly into the groove, otherwise you might ruin the tube. This is now the KT88, the biggest tube I have here, which is more of a tube for a bass amp. For the Ampex amps it was used a lot. So looking at the clean position, it looks very similar as before, but nice bottom end and going up high. If we turn the tone control up, we have starting at about 250, 200 a linear frequency response, and now if we turn up this bright switch, it gives us a nice top end. Going to the hot position, let's switch up here, high, hot here. Again, nice curve. Fairly linear, starting at 250, and brightness is of no use. Did you notice this has a lot more mids than the other tubes, surprisingly? This is the crunch position now. crunchy, warm sound. And last one, the distorted sound. Okay, also this tube likes the distortion a lot, big fat sound. So this was a pretty extensive excursion on different power tubes on the El34. I'll do an excursion on preamp tubes also in the near future. Don't forget to subscribe, or if you liked it, hit the like button, share it, or write a comment. I'd love to hear from you. So take care and see you soon at Lothar's Guitar School again. Take care. Bye bye.